Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. I never thought I'd live long enough to say the world ended quietly, that it didn't begin with screaming in the streets or sirens echoing across the hills. It started in August under a heat wave in the kennels of a forgotten shelter outside Olean, New York. Just me, a few volunteers, and about 24 dogs that were already halfway to being forgotten by the world. My name's Greg Talcott, 34 years old, shelter technician at the Summerfield County Animal Shelter, just west of town on Route 16. It's the kind of place people drive past without ever thinking about unless they need to drop off an unwanted pet. 5 rooms, 2 outdoor pens, 1 small generator in the back for emergencies. That's all it was. Nothing special. But for some reason, it's where it all started. The last week of August was brutal. Temperatures stayed in the mid-90s every day. But it wasn't the heat that had me on edge. It was the silence that came with it. Normally, by late afternoon, you'd hear the cicadas buzzing, lawnmowers starting up, traffic heading into town. But that week, the whole area felt still. Even the birds were quiet. I'd worked there for almost 5 years, and I'd never felt anything like it. Like the land itself was waiting for something. We started getting more strays than usual that Monday. Not just pets that got loose. I mean full strays, mangy, underfed, with no collars or tags. They came in from the east side, around the tree line past the river. First it was a mutt, looked like a German Shepherd mix. The guy who brought him in said the dog had run out into the road and tried to bite his front tire. He was spooked, told me the dog didn't chase him, just stood in the road staring as he circled back and stopped. I thought maybe rabies or heat stroke, but when I looked at the dog, I felt something I couldn't quite explain. He was calm, too calm, didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't cower, just locked eyes with me as I opened the gate and walked him into the kennel. His pupils were wide and unmoving, like he was trying to figure out what I was. By Wednesday, we'd brought in 5 more just like him, all from the same general area. They weren't a pack, but they moved the same way, slow, quiet, not reacting to loud noises or commands. A few of the volunteers joked about zombie dogs after Spindle, a thin terrier with a shredded ear, bit through the rim of her water bowl like it was cardboard. But I didn't laugh. There was something unnatural in the way these dogs were acting. Even the healthy ones inside the shelter started behaving differently. Charlie, one of our most affectionate mixed breeds, stopped barking entirely. Luna, our husky shepherd, began pacing the length of her cage non-stop, from morning until lights out. It wasn't panic. Panic I can handle. This was something else. It felt coordinated, like they were responding to a signal I couldn't hear. I told Claudia, one of our high school volunteers, to keep the new intakes in the side pens for observation. She agreed, but looked uneasy. That was Thursday morning. By that afternoon, I'd already left 2 voicemails for Dr. Sapiro, our vet on retainer. His office line rang once, and then cut off. Cell went straight to voicemail. I didn't think too much of it. He worked multiple clinics around the county and was hard to reach at the best of times. But I made a note to drive into Olean the next day to check in on him personally. That night, just after sundown, the dogs started howling. Not the usual scattered barking or whining we'd hear around feeding time. This was something else. It started low and slow, a single dog in the outdoor kennels, then another joined in, and then another. The tone never rose. It wasn't agitated. It was steady, rhythmic, long, droning howls, like wolves calling to each other from different ridgelines. Claudia and I were mopping the hallway when we heard it. We both stopped moving. I could tell by the way she gripped the mop handle that she felt it too, that this wasn't just some nightly chorus. This sounded intentional. We went to check the outdoor yards. I turned on the floodlights and stepped out, and every dog out there was standing still, facing the east fence line, not looking at us, not even flinching when the lights kicked on. They just stood, ears tilted forward, eyes locked on something we couldn't see past the trees. The hairs on my arms rose, and I didn't know why. It was just dogs, just a heat wave, just a weird night. That's what I told myself as we locked up and left them there. I barely slept that night. Friday morning, I was the first one in. Claudia usually beat me in, but her car wasn't in the lot. Her phone went straight to voicemail. The kennels were quiet, eerily so. Even Luna wasn't pacing. She was pressed into the corner of her pen, eyes wide open. Charlie was laying flat on his side, breathing slow and shallow, like he was sleeping with one ear open. I did a walkthrough of the building, checked the power room. Everything looked normal, but something was off. The air smelled strange. Not dirty, not moldy, just still, like the air hadn't moved all night. That's when I found Claudia's badge on the floor outside Kennel 3. I called her name 3 times. No response. Every room I checked made the silence worse. I ran back to the security monitor in the office. The overnight footage had corrupted. All 4 hours of it between 1 o'clock and 5 a.m. were just a black screen with static crackling. No motion alerts. No flags. But the gate counter had changed. The outer back gate had recorded 1 open and 1 close at 3:17 a.m. I grabbed a broom handle and walked the perimeter. I know how stupid that sounds, but it was the only thing heavy within reach. I passed the burn barrel and moved behind the incinerator shed, and that's where I saw her. She was lying face up behind the shed, twisted at the waist like she'd fallen while running. Her throat had been torn open from the side, but the blood had dried already. Her face looked frozen in the middle of trying to speak, mouth half open, one hand clenched around her phone, like she was trying to call someone even after it was too late. No animal does that to a person. Not like that. And nothing moves that quietly. I called the police the second I got back inside, locked the office door behind me, and sat there staring at the phone while it rang. My hands were still damp from the blood on my palms. When the dispatcher picked up, I told her everything I knew, or at least what I could say without sounding insane. I didn't mention the dogs, or the howling, or the strange behavior. I just told her that a staff member, Claudia Mendez, age 19, had been found unresponsive behind the incinerator shed, with visible injuries. I told her she needed to send someone fast. They showed up 40 minutes later, 2 patrol cars and 1 unmarked SUV. The responding officers taped off the entire back lot, strung yellow barriers across the east kennels, and ordered me to stay inside the main building. I watched through the break room blinds as they zipped her body into a black bag. She didn't even look real anymore, just a shape. One of the cops threw up near the waste bins. That's when I knew I wasn't crazy for how shaken I felt. They didn't let me go home. Not yet. The shelter was officially declared a potential crime scene, and the building was closed to the public pending investigation. For the time being, I was the only one authorized to stay behind, to feed the animals, monitor the cameras, and wait for further instructions. I signed a waiver agreeing to remain on-site under restricted access. They even issued me a temporary code for a secondary perimeter lock installed at the front entrance. The officer who gave it to me didn't look me in the eye. The dogs had gone quiet again, every single one of them. While the police combed the lot and set up barriers, the dogs stayed motionless in their pens. Charlie sat with his back against the gate, tail curled tight around his legs. Luna pressed herself into the corner like she was hiding from something that wasn't there. And Rufus, he was pacing. Not frantically, not like a dog trying to escape. He moved like someone checking exits. Head low, eyes fixed on each gate latch as he passed. Every time he reached the end of his pen, he stopped, looked toward the side door, then turned back. The detective didn't arrive until the next morning. He came alone in a plain white sedan and walked in wearing a grey suit, long sleeves rolled up, tie loosened like he'd already been through a dozen calls that day. He introduced himself as Detective Langford. He looked mid-40s, ex-military by the way he moved, sharp, measured, not the type to be caught off guard by much. He took a statement from me in the front office, recording everything on a small handheld device while jotting in a leather notebook. I told him how I found Claudia, how I'd last seen her the day before, how the power had flickered and the animals had been behaving strangely. I left out the howling. I left out the looks in their eyes. He paused when I mentioned the back gate sensor going off at 3:17 a.m. and asked if I had the logs. I printed the timestamps from the motion detectors and handed him the pages. He looked at them in silence for a long moment, then nodded slowly and asked to see the body camera feeds. When I explained the overnight footage was corrupted, he didn't blink, just asked if we had any backups. I told him we didn't, at least not locally. He said he'd send a tech to try and recover it from the server next week. Before he left, Langford asked to walk the perimeter. I unlocked the rear door and followed him outside. The morning air was thick with heat again. No wind, no birdsong, just the occasional crackle of static from the police radio on his belt. He walked the entire fence line with a slow, steady pace, stopping at the gouge under the chain link where Claudia must have been attacked. He crouched, ran a finger along the bent wire, and then looked up at the tree line. "Where's the nearest residence east of here?" he asked. "Nothing but forest for 2 miles, I said. "After that, it's the river, then the old power station." He didn't answer, just stared for another few seconds, then stood and dusted off his hands. As we walked back inside, he glanced at the kennels and stopped mid-stride. Rufus was sitting upright, pressed against the bars, not moving, not panting, just watching him. Langford tilted his head slightly, as if listening. "What's this one's story?" he asked. "Stray," I said. "Picked up Monday. Came from the east side. No tag, no chip. Behavior's been strange." Langford stepped closer to the cage, studying the dog with the same cold detachment he'd used on the scene outside. "Looks like he's been through something." "He's not the only one," I replied. He didn't press further, just nodded and left without another word. That afternoon, I fed the dogs as usual, or tried to. Most refused to eat, even the ones that usually begged at the sound of kibble. Spindle sniffed at her bowl, then turned and pressed her face into the corner. Charlie didn't move at all. Rufus ignored the food and kept watching the hallway, like he was waiting for someone. I went into the office, pulled the shades, and turned off the lights. For a long time, I just sat there listening to the silence on the other side of the wall. There were 24 animals in the building, but I couldn't hear a single one. Not a whimper, not a growl, not a step. Only the soft hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the foundation as the sun beat down on the roof. Around sunset, it started again, the howling. Only this time, it was louder, and it wasn't coming from inside the shelter. It came from the woods beyond the fence, then farther. Down the ravine, from the trees beyond the access road. Distant but deliberate. Not panicked, not random, like a beacon sounding out across the land. And from inside, the dogs rose to answer. I stood by the window, unmoving, as every animal in the shelter lifted its head in unison. First Rufus, then Luna, then Charlie, then the rest, one by one. Mouths opened. Howls rose, not all at once, but staggered, synchronized. A code, a call. I had no illusions anymore about coincidence. I'd worked with animals long enough to know patterns, and this wasn't normal. I'd seen stressed dogs, malnourished ones, feral ones. I'd seen kennel rage, storm anxiety, even seizures that left animals pacing in circles for hours. This was different. This was deliberate, controlled. Whatever was affecting them had gone past behavioral. It felt strategic. I didn't know what to do except wait, watch, and document what I could. I hit record on the old DSLR we used for adoption photos, aimed it at the hallway, and captured the sound as best I could through the glass. I labeled the clip, time-stamped it, and backed it up to a portable drive. Then I shut off the monitor. I don't know why. Maybe part of me didn't want to see what came next. The howling continued for nearly 15 minutes. Then, as quickly as it started, it stopped. Not faded out. Not died off slowly. Just ended. Every dog dropped into silence within seconds of each other. I stood there, ears ringing in the sudden stillness. Then Rufus sat down. Luna lay flat. Charlie pressed himself into the kennel corner again like before. One by one, they returned to stillness. Eyes still open, still facing the front hallway, as if awaiting instruction. That night, I stayed in the staff room, sleeping on the cot we kept for emergencies. The lights stayed off, and I wedged a chair under the doorknob out of reflex. I didn't feel safe, not from outside intruders, but from the ones I was now locked inside with. I kept a flashlight in my hand and a pipe wrench from the maintenance closet next to the pillow. Just in case. I didn't sleep. Not really. By morning, something had changed. Not with the animals, but with the building itself. The air was stale. The temperature had dropped even though the thermostat still read 78. The vents weren't circulating properly, and the backup fan had shut off again. I walked through the building, flipping breakers, checking fuses. Nothing seemed blown. I made a note to report the power fluctuations, but I knew nobody from the city office was going to respond on a weekend, especially with the shelter still sealed under police order. I went out back to inspect the generator. That's when I noticed the tracks. They weren't paw prints, not exactly. They were like stretched impressions, long in the toes but too narrow in the heel. Whatever had made them had walked low to the ground, almost crawling. The prints were dry but recent, overlapping the edge of the concrete pad where the generator sat. And they didn't come from the woods. They came out of the fenced area. I followed the trail for about 20 feet before it vanished into the weeds behind the compost heap. My skin was already crawling, but what made my stomach twist was realizing there was no break in the fence where the tracks emerged. No dugout gap, no torn wire. Whatever had passed through had either climbed over the 8-foot barrier topped in barbed spiral, or it had already been inside. Back inside, I checked the kennels. Spindle was missing. Her cage door was closed, latched from the outside like normal, but she was gone. I scanned every corner of the kennel wing, every office, every closet. Nothing. The surveillance feeds were static again for the hours between 2 o'clock and 5 a.m. No motion alerts. Just another blackout. No power logs. No trip sensors. I opened the clipboard by the main door and scribbled a status note in all caps. Missing dog. Possible escape. Then stopped halfway through signing my name. Something wasn't adding up. That dog couldn't have escaped on her own, not without tripping at least one of the infrared sensors. They'd picked up raccoons and squirrels before, even bugs sometimes. Yet nothing showed. No entry, no exit. As I stood there trying to make sense of it, a loud bang echoed from the back hallway. Metal on concrete. I dropped the pen and rushed around the corner toward the supply room. The lock bar on one of the internal gates was on the ground, like it had been knocked loose from inside. Luna was standing at the end of the corridor, just outside her pen. She didn't charge, didn't bark. She just stood there, tail down, ears perked, watching me. I approached slowly, keeping the wrench at my side. My voice was calm, like I was speaking to a loose animal in a street, not an old shelter dog I'd known for over a year. "Luna, come on girl, let's go back." She took 2 steps backward, eyes never leaving mine. Her legs moved slow, stiff, like the movement wasn't natural. She turned her head slightly and looked down the hallway toward the fire exit. Then she bolted. I ran after her. The door alarm should have triggered, but the panel never lit up. I reached the door just in time to see her dart through the grass behind the fence and disappear into the tree line. I stood there, frozen in the open doorway, watching the long grass swaying behind her like something else was moving beneath it. I didn't go after her. Not out there. Not alone. By afternoon, another dog was gone. Charlie. No signs of forced entry. No scratches on the cage. No bent wire. Just gone. I checked the logs. The door hadn't been opened since morning, but he wasn't there. His food was untouched. His blanket was still bunched in the corner. The camera over that hallway was off. Again. I tried calling Detective Langford. No answer. Left a voicemail saying there had been a break-in or possible incident at the shelter, that 2 animals were now missing under strange circumstances, that I didn't feel safe staying there alone. No callback. I tried the non-emergency line. Nothing. Then, the local precinct. Straight to a recording. I checked my phone's data connection. No bars. I rebooted the router. The diagnostics panel was red across the board. No signal. It was as if the entire building had been cut off. That night, I locked the doors, barricaded the rear hallway with the rolling storage rack, and pulled every file, adoption sheet, and intake form into a box just in case I needed to run. I packed a duffel with canned food, bottled water, and the portable radio from the break room. I didn't have a gun, but I had the pipe wrench and the bear spray from the front desk. It would have to do. I tried sleeping again on the cot in the office, but I kept waking up to soft noises. Not loud, just enough to make me second-guess whether I'd heard anything at all. The sound of nails clicking on linoleum, a soft creak of a gate shifting under weight. Once, around 2 a.m., I heard something shuffle past the office door and pause just outside. I held my breath and didn't move. After a moment, it moved on. At dawn, I went to check the kennels again. That's when I noticed the latches. All of them had been loosened, not undone, but tilted, as if someone had tested each one and left them just shy of being released. Every single pen. I didn't want to touch them. I just stood there, eyes scanning the row of cages, trying to understand what I was looking at. No two latches had the same angle, some barely off the lock, others almost completely undone, but held in place like someone had hesitated at the last second. I relocked every gate, double-checked them, even ran a zip tie through the frames on the 3 main pens. It was useless. I knew it was useless. If they wanted out, they could get out. They were just waiting. The smear marks were still on the wall. 4 parallel streaks of something thick and brownish, half-dried, clawed into the paint. I sprayed it with disinfectant, scrubbed hard until the top layer of tile chipped off. Didn't matter. The image was still burned into my mind. Not claw marks exactly. It looked like fingers. Too long, too spaced apart. Not from a dog. I tried calling again. Cell phone, landline, even the battery backup satellite box we'd used during storm seasons. Nothing worked. No dial tone, no signal bar, not even the emergency override number connected. Just silence. I went outside and walked to the edge of the property, stood at the crest of the gravel pullout by the old cedar tree, and held my phone to the sky like it would make a difference. Still nothing. A dead black bar. That's when I realized I hadn't heard a single car on Route 16 all morning. Not a tractor, not a school bus, not a single passing delivery van. The world had gone quiet again. I spent the rest of the morning documenting everything. Every missing dog, every anomaly, every hour of camera failure. I wrote it all down in my personal notebook and started taking video clips on the shelter DSLR. If something happened to me, and at that point, I had to admit that was a real possibility, someone would find the truth, if anyone came at all. Around noon, the phone rang. The sound nearly made me jump. I stared at it for a second, then grabbed it. It was a garbled connection, but I could hear the voice on the other end. "Greg, this is Langford. You still there?" "Yeah, I've been trying to reach you for 2 days," I said. Phones were dead. So was the shelter line. Couldn't get a single call out. I even tried emergency. Nothing went through. There was a pause, then a low sigh on his end. "You weren't the only one. Whole county had a systems failure. Telecom grid dropped late Friday. County servers overloaded. Cell towers failed in sequence. They shut down the whole backbone to prevent cascading damage." "All of it?" I asked. "Power companies, traffic systems, water control networks. Everything ran through that same infrastructure. When it started collapsing, they triggered a rolling blackout protocol. Half the tech in the state is running on duct tape and patched firmware. State command didn't want it turning into another upstate grid disaster." "So it wasn't just the shelter?" "No, but you're still our only flagged incident with a fatality. And now you're telling me more animals are missing?" "2 are gone. 1 escaped into the woods. The other, Charlie, just disappeared. No exit trip, no latch tampering. Gone. And this morning, I found every cage latch half undone." He didn't speak for a moment. Then, "I'm coming back. Stay where you are. Keep it locked down. If anything changes, write it down. I'll be there within the hour." For the first time in 3 days, I felt a flicker of relief. I kept busy by cleaning up the broken shelving near the back hallway and double-checking the gates one more time. Every 5 minutes, I looked out the front window for his car. He pulled up just past 1 p.m. Same white sedan, same loose tie, but he moved differently this time, more cautious, as if he could feel the tension in the air before he even stepped inside. He waved through the window, and I buzzed him through the new lock the police had installed. Langford looked around the lobby as he entered. Place looked smaller than I remembered. "It's the same," I said. You're just seeing it different now." He nodded, stepped into the kennel hallway, and scanned the pens. Most of the animals were curled in the corners or standing motionless near the back of their cages. They didn't react to him. No barking, no movement, just watching. "You see that?" I asked, following his gaze. "I see dogs that look like they've been drugged," he muttered. "They haven't. They're not even eating. Some of them won't drink, and I swear they know what's happening, not just aware, involved." He crouched in front of Rufus's cage. The shepherd stared back, unmoving, not even flinching at his presence. Langford leaned closer. "What's with this one?" Rufus was the first stray brought in from the East Road, 4 days ago. He's been acting like this from the start. No reactions, no barking. He stares like he's waiting for someone to speak first. Langford stood up slowly and looked down the hallway. "All right, show me the latches, the ones that were half undone." I led him through the corridor, pointing out each pen. "I zip-tied 3 of them shut this morning, just to be safe. But it was like someone walked down the row last night and tested every lock. No signs of force, just intent." "Someone broke in?" he asked. "Maybe, or something that was already in here figured out how to manipulate the locks." Langford shook his head. "Dogs don't open pens." "Yeah," I muttered. "They didn't used to howl in Morse code either." He stopped. "What did you say?" I hesitated. "The howling, it's not random. It's patterned. Last night I mapped the intervals. There were 4 bursts equally spaced. First from the tree line, then from farther out. Every time the shelter answered, the source replied in exact delay, like a ping." Langford looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to believe me or arrest me. He opened his mouth to say something, then froze. A low growl echoed down the hall. It came from the far end. One of the cages had gone dark, the lights above it flickering, dimming. Then a second growl joined it, then a third, from inside the cages. I turned to see Rufus standing now, pressed against the bars. Luna beside him, already growling deep in her chest, eyes fixed not on me, but on Langford. "Back up," I said quickly. "Get behind me, now." Langford raised his hand slowly. "What the hell is this?" Before I could answer, one of the zip-tied cages popped. The latch didn't break. The tie itself had been chewed through from the inside. Spindle lunged from the shadows, clearing the cage threshold in one motion. Langford drew his sidearm, but it was too late. Rufus hit the gate hard enough to bend the hinges. Luna slipped through a panel I hadn't realized was loose. In seconds, they were on him. I watched, helpless, as they swarmed him. Not barking, not howling, just attacking. Quiet, precise. They didn't fight like animals. They coordinated. Rufus latched onto his arm, pulling him sideways while Luna dragged at his legs. Spindle went for the throat. Langford fired once. The shot cracked off the concrete and hit nothing. He didn't scream, not at first. He was too shocked, too busy trying to understand what was happening. The dogs didn't maul him. They took him apart. I stumbled back, slammed the emergency door shut, and threw the locking bolt. I fell against the wall, covered in sweat, too numb to move. I could still hear the wet tearing sounds on the other side, the low snarls, then silence. When I dared to peek through the reinforced glass, I saw what was left, and it wasn't much. Langford's gun lay on the floor beside a dark trail leading back down the hallway. The dogs were gone. I stayed in that office for what must have been half a day, maybe longer. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I barely breathed. Just sat there on the floor beside the locked door, wrench in hand, watching the narrow glass pane for any shadow that might move past. Time dragged. At first, I expected them to come back. I imagined paws scratching against the bottom of the door. Or worse, the handle slowly turning with impossible precision. But nothing happened. Not a sound. Not even distant barking. Just silence. I counted out the hours by the sun creeping across the linoleum. It was bright when I locked myself in, high and harsh through the western window. By the time the light dimmed and shifted orange, my body was stiff, legs tingling from lack of movement. I hadn't even drunk water. I just sat there, heart thudding in my chest, listening to the stillness like it could betray me. Eventually, I realized that if they hadn't come yet, they probably wouldn't. Or maybe they didn't care anymore. Maybe they had what they wanted. Or who? That thought chilled me worse than the rest. I knew I couldn't stay locked in there forever, and the longer I waited, the worse it would be if they decided to come back with more. Around late afternoon, I forced myself to get up. My muscles protested every movement. I sipped from one of the water bottles in my go-bag, wiped the sweat off my neck with a paper towel, and peered through the small safety glass panel in the door. The hallway beyond looked unchanged, still empty, still quiet. Langford's gun was still visible where it had fallen, black grip slicked with blood, barrel angled toward the back office, but the body was gone. I stood there for at least 3 minutes staring at the floor. I kept expecting to see a boot, a hand, a smear of something that would prove I'd imagined wrong, but there was nothing left of him, just the sidearm and a long sticky drag mark that disappeared into the far shadows. I thought maybe the dogs had dragged him off to finish what they started. I didn't want to imagine the state of what was left. Still gripping the wrench, I slowly slid the bolt out of the lock, cracked the door an inch, and listened. Nothing. The shelter air smelled worse now, stagnant, damp, and undercut with something sharp and coppery. I stepped into the hallway and moved toward the gun, crouching down carefully to pick it up without touching the blood. It was heavier than I expected. I checked the slide. It had 1 round chambered and 3 left in the mag. He hadn't had time to fire more than once. I tucked the weapon into my belt and began inching toward the end of the corridor. My shoes made faint wet sounds against the floor. That dark streak from Langford's body stretched into the shadows near the rear exit, where the utility lights no longer worked. As I approached the glass side door, I stopped cold. He was outside. Langford, or what was left of him. At first, I thought he was just standing there in the tall grass, swaying in the wind. His clothes were torn, his sleeves soaked dark. One arm hung limp, bent at the elbow in a way that bones don't bend. The side of his jaw was missing, and his throat had been opened down to the collarbone, skin flapping slightly with every twitch. But he was standing, upright, eyes wide and fixed on the building. I froze, too stunned to react. My brain kept rejecting what I saw. No human body, no body, could survive that kind of damage, let alone stand. I watched him shift weight from one foot to the other, as though trying to steady himself. His head jerked slightly, like a glitching video. A repeated stutter, right, left, then still. His mouth opened slowly, slack and ruined, lips barely there anymore. No sound came out, just a slow wheeze of wind through an empty throat. I stumbled back from the door, heart pounding so hard I felt dizzy. I hadn't unlocked it. That gave me some reassurance at least. He couldn't get in unless something opened it for him, but he was looking at me, through that dirty pane of reinforced glass, staring in like he could feel me behind the shadows. I backed up down the hallway until I hit the divider gate. Locked, thank God. Then I heard something else. A new sound, almost a shuffle. Not from the yard this time, but from the east kennels. Something scuffed the concrete, then a faint click, like claws on metal, and then nothing. I forced myself to move. I had to confirm it. Had to see if the pens were still shut. I crept up the side corridor and peeked around the corner. The kennels were empty, every one of them. The latches were still in place. Some twisted, some torn. One was snapped off entirely, but there wasn't a single dog left inside. Not Rufus, not Luna, not any of them. I turned back toward the front office and almost dropped the wrench when I saw movement through the side window again. Langford had stepped closer. Just one slow, dragging pace. His right foot scraped along the edge of the walkway. His head jerked again, left, then center, and I swear his eyes were following me. I ducked low behind the filing cabinet, heart thudding in my throat. I didn't want to believe what I'd just seen. That wasn't reflex. That wasn't some random muscle movement. Langford, whatever was left of him, was aware. Minutes passed, maybe 10, I don't know. When I looked again, he was gone. No body, no dragging marks, just an empty yard and flattened grass. The light was starting to fade. I checked the ammo again. 1 chambered, 3 left. It wouldn't be enough. The dogs were gone. Langford was up and moving after being torn to pieces, and the signal, or whatever had been summoning them, was still out there. I started to think that maybe this wasn't isolated. Maybe it wasn't just the shelter or the woods behind it. Maybe this thing had already spread far beyond here, and this place was just one more forgotten ignition point in a wildfire nobody knew was already burning. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the break room with the lights off, Langford's pistol in my hand, and my eyes fixed on the glass. Not once did I hear another howl. That was almost worse. The silence pressed in on me like the building was holding its breath. I kept expecting to hear something outside, shuffling footsteps, nails on the tile, maybe that low rasping growl I'd heard before. But there was nothing. By morning, I knew I couldn't stay. I'd played it safe long enough. Locked doors and hesitation hadn't done a thing to protect me. The shelter was compromised, and I had no way to contact anyone. If help was coming, it should have come already. I needed to get out, get to a place with cell service, find someone to report this to, someone who could make sense of it. There was only one problem. My car had been taken for maintenance 2 days before the shelter closed, and the only vehicle left in the lot was Langford's white sedan, still parked exactly where he'd left it. I could see it through the lobby window, keys most likely still in his pocket. His pocket, which now wandered somewhere out in the brush beyond the fence line. Maybe a mile off. Maybe watching from behind a tree. I didn't know. I spent the better part of an hour debating my next move. I wasn't a fighter. I wasn't brave. I was a guy who shoveled kennels and updated microchip records. I didn't know how to handle something like this. I only knew that sitting in that dark building one more night would break me. And if Langford really was moving, if whatever had happened to the dogs had started changing people too, then I couldn't wait. I had to take a risk. I packed my bag, 2 water bottles, 3 cans of dog food, a flashlight, 1 flare from the emergency kit, and Langford's pistol. I wrapped it in a towel before putting it in my belt. I didn't trust myself not to drop it if things went wrong. Then I waited, watched the yard for movement. I used the side windows, kept low, eyes tracking every shift of the trees. Nothing moved, not even birds. Around midday, I slipped out the rear access door and crept around the side of the building, heart slamming against my ribs with every step. The car was right where it had been, driver's side facing me, front left tire in the shallow gravel ditch. No sign of Langford, no sign of anything. I moved in slow bursts. 10 steps, stop, look. 10 more, crouch. I reached the vehicle and pressed a hand to the hood. Still cool. No prints in the dust on the windshield. Just old pine needles and dead bugs. I checked the window first, then the interior. No sign of struggle inside. No blood. The door was unlocked. I opened it and froze, half expecting an alarm. Nothing. Just the faint creak of the hinges. The keys weren't in the ignition. I hadn't really expected them to be. He would have had them on him when he came in. I turned back to the grass. If I was going to do this, I had to do it now. I circled around behind the building, trying to retrace where I'd seen Langford last. The path through the grass was still faintly visible, a crooked trail of flattened reeds and broken stems where his body had moved. I followed it as quietly as I could, ears straining for any rustle or breath that wasn't mine. The trail led into the woods, just past the slope behind the compost pit. There, at the base of a wide oak, I saw him. Langford was standing again. His back was to me, clothes torn, blood matted in clumps down his back and neck. He rocked slightly, like a drunk man struggling to balance. His left arm hung at his side, but his right was twitching up toward his jacket pocket in slow, jerky motions, like he was trying to remember something. I stayed low behind a fallen log and waited. My whole body felt locked in place. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, just watched. Then, as if his body gave up trying, he slumped forward and landed face down in the weeds. He didn't move again. I waited 5 full minutes before crawling over, step by step, quiet as I could manage. When I reached him, I circled around his legs, kept the wrench ready in one hand as I knelt beside his upper body. His mouth was open now, twisted and still. The expression was wrong. eyes unfocused, muscles slack, but something inside his face still looked tense, like he was trying to hold something in. I didn't dwell on it. I reached into the jacket pocket. The keys were there, bloodied but intact. I backed away fast, half expecting him to lurch again. He didn't. I ran, didn't even try to hide it, sprinting over the grass past the rear wall of the shelter, back around to the gravel. The sound of my own feet hitting the ground drowned out everything else. I didn't stop until I was in the car, doors locked, keys in hand. The engine turned over on the second try. The relief I felt was immediate and overwhelming. I threw the car into drive and peeled out of the lot, tires spitting gravel across the fence. I didn't look back. I didn't care what might be following. I just wanted out. As I reached the end of the access road, I finally started to think I might be okay, that maybe I'd gotten away early enough. That's when I saw the man walking down Route 16. He was in his 50s, maybe older, plaid shirt, work boots, limping heavily. His arms swung too loosely, like they weren't fully under his control. When I slowed down to pass, I looked at his face. His eyes were gone. Not just blind, gone, sockets filled with something grayish. His mouth twitched like he was trying to speak, but only a wheeze came out. He didn't react to the car, just kept walking. 100 yards later, I saw another figure. A teenager, I think. T-shirt, torn jeans, dragging something behind her that looked like a shovel. She was covered in dirt. Her feet were bare. Then came the dogs. 3 of them, crossing the road up ahead like they had the right of way. One of them was Luna. She turned her head as I passed and looked directly at me. Her mouth wasn't open. Her teeth weren't bared. She didn't growl, just watched me through the windshield, head slightly cocked. There were more of them beyond the shoulder, at least 6, maybe more, sitting or moving slowly through the tall grass. They weren't running wild. They weren't hunting. They were patrolling, spacing themselves like sentries, calm, deliberate. I kept driving, faster. Every turn in the road showed me more. A man standing on the hood of his pickup, unmoving. A woman crouched behind a mailbox, head tilted like she was listening to something inside the ground. No traffic, no voices, no sirens, only silence. I'm writing this now from a gas station just north of Portville. The lights are on, but no one's here. The register is untouched. The door was unlocked. There's no signal, but the landline gave me a dial tone for 5 seconds before cutting out. I don't know who to call. I don't know who's left to listen. Whatever started behind the fence at the shelter is spreading. The animals were first, then Langford. Now the people on the road. I don't know if it's a virus or a parasite or something older than science ever studied. I just know it learns. It waits. And it doesn't need to rush. It already owns the dark. If you find this, if you're still reading, stay away from the eastern counties. Stay away from the woods. Don't go looking for strays. Don't trust the people who walk toward you without blinking. And if a dog looks you in the eye and doesn't bark, run. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.